So welcome everyone. My name is Sunitha and thank you for joining us on this webinar on undocumented migrants and women's rights and intersectional liberation, brought to you by Regularise. Regularise are a migrant-founded grassroots collective made up of migrants, British citizens and allies. We seek to improve the quality of life of undocumented migrants living in the UK by attaining them basic rights and a safer and more equitable path to settlement and citizenship. Regularise would like the UK government to implement a regularisation scheme similar to the EU settlement scheme for all migrants currently living in the UK, without leave to remain or other appropriate documentation, and for all those who have lived in the UK for at least 5 years to be settled permanently. For those here for less than 5 years, they must be given a right to remain, similar to the pre-settled status in the EU settlement scheme that will allow them to apply for settlement, indefinite leave to remain, after they reach the same period of continuous residence of 5 years. We focus on solidarity and amplifying the voices and needs of undocumented migrants, and we're centred around and informed by those with lived experience. For some context of why we're having this discussion, according to Pew Research, there are an estimated 800,000 to 1.2 million undocumented migrants living in the UK, though it's difficult to know exact numbers due to the invisibilised nature of living undocumented. It's estimated about half of those that are undocumented are women and girls. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen how women have been disproportionately impacted, given that they are often take on the bulk of childcare responsibilities and are often in lower paid work with a higher exposure to risk of infection and illnesses due to work like cleaning, caring for children and the elderly. However, it is important to recognise that this has impacted migrant women and women of colour disproportionately. Depending on immigration status, migrants with insecure, undocumented status are unlikely to be entitled access to welfare and other forms of support due to exclusionary policies and immigration rules like the one known as no recourse to public funds, NRPF. For some women, visas are linked to their partner. In cases of domestic abuse, there is fear of reporting to the authorities, and where domestic abuse occurs, their choices may be limited between being homeless and destitute or staying with an abusive partner. I am now going to introduce Ribeiro-Addy, Labour MP for Streatham, who is also on the Women's Equality Committee, to speak.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to speak, and apologies in advance if I pause to sneeze. My allergies have just started today and I am completely unprepared for them. I'm really pleased to be speaking at this event today because I think it is something that is often overlooked, just how much migrant women suffer because of the particular policies that we have and the support that's available to them specifically. And when I was thinking about this, it took me back to a meeting I had many years ago. This is just before 2011, and just with aid agencies actually. And somebody pointed out to me that whereas UNICEF had been set up in 1946, the UNHCR had been set up in 1950. We didn't have anything, the UN didn't have a structure particularly for women until 2011. Now you'd think that was a massive oversight. I would have thought that was a massive oversight, but it's taken so long, and even till today, for people to realise just how much lifting up women and supporting women is central to supporting communities overall. And looking at the way in which people have suffered during the coronavirus pandemic, we see all of those, evidence for those arguments being made again and again. Now, Sinisa laid everything out there quite perfectly in terms of what the issues are. But even where we have found certain things to be against the law, so we're talking about no recourse to public funds, we are still struggling to see changes in policy because women are not being considered and families are not being considered in the way that they should be. And thinking about the new rules that, that the Home Secretary laid down just before we left Parliament, this new plan, and thinking about how much that's going to discriminate against women, and the fact that we're thinking of women that have been trafficked and women that are fleeing persecution, different types of persecution, be it for their beliefs or for their sexuality, all of these different persecutions. And we're going to base whether or not we give them sanctuary on how they arrived in the country, not based on their needs. And we know already from our disgraceful hostile environment and immigration detention centres and a Home Office which doesn't seem to care when it comes to applications, just how much women are failed again and again going through our various immigration process at various centres, and at some point people have to recognise and that it has to be, as much as it is a migrants' rights argument, as much as where we can see immigration has always been a synonym for race, as much as it is an argument for better or ending racism in the way which it plays out in our immigration system, it is also, as much as all of that, a feminist argument. Because we cannot, as women or groups of women or individual women, claim that we stand to support all women and we stand up for the rights of all women if we don't look at the plight of women right across the world. We don't look at the fact that country which they thought the idea of being a feminist or someone that champions all women, the idea that you could possibly do that without looking at the plight of migrants, to change that just makes no sense to me. So I'll leave that there. I'm really interested to hear from the other panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ribeiro-Addy, for speaking on that. I think one thing that you did mention is we need to focus on the intersectional nature of these issues. For those who don't know what intersectionality is, it's like a way for us to view and see how different types of oppression are linked and exacerbate one another. So in this context, we need to recognise that the struggles of undocumented women, who are often women of colour, they're like aspects of race and status compound their issues. So next, I'd like to welcome Loraine and Mponela. She's the chairperson of CARAG, and one of the leaders in Sisters Not Strangers Coalition. Thank you, Loraine.
Thank you. High five to all women around the world. I'm just so delighted to be here. I'm just glad to be together with all of you online. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share with everyone our day-to-day lives. Refused, I keep trying. There are many ways how women become undocumented. People who are seeking asylum and are refused, people trafficked in the country and dumped by the agent, which also leads them into domestic slavery and servitude or forced into prostitution. Some end up working without a salary. If you were on a spouse visa and if your marriage didn't work. I will just give you one example here. So Rachel worked as a personal assistant to a government official in her country. There was a time when her employer moved to work in the UK, so they brought her over. The job role for Rachel changed. She became the house girl. Her employer became abusive and controlling. One day, she was told to leave and became street homeless and destitute with no one to help her. So her pastor from her church offered her a home where she lived, but it was in exchange of housework as well as child minding. They had 3 children. Rachel is some immigration. One of the 3 objectives of the new plan for immigration reads to remove more easily from the UK those with no right to be here. So this will mean immigration officers rounding up people like Rachel. Many women have experienced rape, they've been trafficked, or they've been exploited before arriving in this country. We can only expect that exploitation of undocumented women to continue. The new plan for immigration risks deterring undocumented migrant women from reporting abuse due to fear of being deported or other repercussions. It will also facilitate other forms of modern slavery, which exploit vulnerable women. And we can also expect other forms of violence against women to continue too, because we live in destitution and poverty. These new immigration plans will reinforce perpetrators' power to use women's insecure immigration status, leaving many women too afraid to seek help. We have young people in this country. They will continue to be denied education. Some women are here because they are trying to protect their own daughters from female genital mutilation. We are all in this country or the world over facing challenges of the pandemic. We are also fighting battles for racial justice, as well as our own battle for survival as undocumented migrants. Women have lived in these appalling situations for 20 years or plus. And in order to regularize their stay, they are asked for bank statement, pay slips, or their passport and things like that. And yet we know we are not allowed to work. We are not allowed to have a bank account. We can't have pay slips. We can't have, in the case of Rachel, her employer had taken her passport away and she doesn't have that passport as well. So even after living so long in this country, we can still not integrate. We cannot vote. We cannot make decisions about our own body. We are charged for giving birth, and yet healthcare is a human right. Women have no choice in terms of space where they want to live. And being denied employment, it is so disempowering. It leads to mental health problems. Sometimes when we try and speak up, we are told that we're liars. And lack of screening for mental health in undocumented women, it limits the possibilities of early interventions. I can go on and on, but my time is limited. So yeah, I'm just very thankful to be here and ready for the discussions with the rest of the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Loraine. Thank you so much for speaking about issues that we will touch on as we discuss this matter further, and just highlighting how precarious the situation is for undocumented migrant women. I'd like to bring in now Bridget Obi. She's an advocate and volunteer coordinator at Baobab Women's Project. Over to you, Bridget.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. It's nice to be here. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk. I'm Bridget, and I work with Baobab's Women's Project, where we assist women with immigration, health, financial situations, and housing. We are here to advocate with refugee and migrant women to see how they are integrated into whatever community they find themselves. But before we get to that bit, there's what we call the transition, where women and refugees are not actually talked through what it is when they get their status. And after going all through the struggles and they find themselves, and I've heard women saying they rather remain an asylum seeker because even getting the papers is still a lot of struggles. There are loads of things they do not understand. And this is where we come in. So what we do is try and support women as much as we can, and then probably empower them to do things for themselves. Of the situations of how do they transit from being in a NAS accommodation to being homeless, and how long they could stay in probably temporary accommodation, such as probably hotels and hostels, and what do they go through if eventually they start bidding for a property, what support do they get? All these things are missing. And this is what the council are supposed to be doing. So we come into this picture to say, now this is what you do, these are the questions you ask. And at the same time, they get problems when it comes to what do you call benefits, how to get their kids into school, do they have access to free school meals, registration with GPs? They are so limited because the problem again is where we talk about the language barrier. Most of them, the first language is not English. How do we get interpreters to help them? How do we get the right people at the right time to see that they get the support they need? This is where Baobab comes in. And what we do is we now, because we are now community advocates, we have them in place where they support women to get access to services needed for themselves and the family. And what we do again is to see that they are actually assigned to probably go for ESOL classes, and to help if they could help, that could help them with language, to limit the language barrier. So in essence, women and migrants and their kids go through a lot that we think the government are not looking into. They go through so much that it tends to affect their mental health. And honestly, when their mental health is affected, they don't make any headway. So we hope we're able to touch on such topics to do with their total mental well-being. And I'm happy to take questions from the board. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bridget. I think it's important to highlight how different the precarious nature and how it affects women's mental health, and the things that you're doing around supporting them around housing and language skills. I think that's really important for people to have the skills to equip them to deal with society and integrate with society. And obviously exclusion policies that we know from the government really try to exclude them from society. We will get to questions at the end, so we will invite our next panelist. It's Lynda Uzar. She's the founder of Solidarity Britannia, a food hive supporting people living with NRPF in East London. So I will hand it over to Lynda to speak.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Sunita, for the invite. I'm really happy to be speaking tonight because I feel like the topic of no recourse public funds was completely overlooked. I don't know if you remember, but it was just when Boris Johnson was asked by a journalist about no recourse public funds, and he didn't know what it even meant. The embarrassment that, people started talking about this. And even then, I felt like the interest was mainly based around people with no recourse public funds who are documented. PEW says that there is 1.6 million no recourse public funds who are documented, but there are also nearly 1.3 million undocumented ones. So I'm really happy that you're talking about women and the section of those who are undocumented and how much they suffer. So I'm Lynda, everyone. I am I'm local activist, campaigner. I'm the founder of Solidarity Britannia, also the founder of IFA, the International Forum for Algerian Women. I set up Solidarity Britannia last year in March at the beginning of the lockdown with the aim of supporting people with no recourse public funds in London with weekly food parcels, online English classes, legal advice referrals, accessing the vaccine, registering with GPs, etc. We have about 700 registered beneficiaries with us. 90% of them are undocumented. They all know recourse public funds, but 90% of them are undocumented. The ratio between women and men there isn't a big difference, and the issues, the problems that these women go through are heartbreaking. First one is living in fear. I mean, we are living the pandemic. We can't leave our houses. Especially when the pandemic started at the beginning, nobody knew what it was. We can't travel. You can't see the people that you love. But guess what? People, especially women, undocumented ones, live like that all year round. But with the pandemic, the situation just became even worse. Hunger is something that I witnessed and I still see. We try our best to support them, but we used to operate 7 days a week on a voluntary basis because we had the resources, the venue and everything, but now we're only doing 1 day a week. I'm hoping to make it, to extend it 2 more days, but at the moment we're not able to help all these 700 undocumented people, especially the women and the children. The other issue is no information for them. The government is very, I'm gonna use the word funny. They're doing all these campaigns and the track and trace, spending millions of pounds in things that are not gonna be efficient if not everybody is included on the system, and information as well, They trying so much, so hard to convince people to come and do the vaccine. But I did refer people who are undocumented, a lot of women, to go to the hospital, and they went and then they were declined. So this is against human rights, against, I just feel like sometimes am I dreaming, am I living in the UK? It is very hard for men to flee their countries. The route, the process is just so dangerous. But for women to go through that route, it just means that they really, most of them are so skilled, they have so much skills. They all like engineers and, solicitors and whatever from other countries to come here. It means that they're just looking for a better life, and arriving here, especially because of the pandemic, me talking to women who are undocumented and asking me if I can send them pads because they're having their period and they don't have money to buy. It's just breaks my heart, and I just feel that something needs to be done urgently by the government and by getting everybody who's trying to do something unite, because what I see is a lot of different organizations, different charities trying to do things separately. Registering with a GP is a big issue. We've been able to help few women and men, but women to do it, but not all of them. It depends on the area where you are. East London is more helpful in that sense. Domestic violence and sexual abuse from partners is a huge issue, and women choose to stay quiet and because they depend on that man. Prostitution and declared prostitution as well, just for them to get money and pay for food for their children. I have women who are breastfeeding who sometimes, call me. A lady was crying on the phone saying that she can't breastfeed her baby because she didn't eat enough. So all these are issues that we need to address. I'm so sorry. Mommy, this trouser.
That's all right, Lynda. Just take us a minute. I think it's, we'll just come back to Lynda in a second. I just wanted to highlight, before going back to Lynda, what she'd spoken about, how the pandemic has exacerbated the issues for a lot of undocumented migrants, including women, and how this is how people, how they live all through, before this pandemic. This isn't something new. They were living underground, they struggled, but the situation of the pandemic has exacerbated things for a variety of reasons. Yeah, I'll hand you back to Lynda.
Apologies. I'm sure you all, some of them are mums and know what having babies and children at home. So the other point is modern slavery. These women are exploitation by their employers, by their landlords. You know, everybody's taking advantage of these women. I had one of my beneficiaries lately speaking to me. The thing about Solidarity Britannia is like we are a family. We listen to these people. We don't just give them the food and they leave. So we have this trust relationship, and the community we work with is mainly North African, and I'm North African. So there is this, you know, relationship. And I had one of my beneficiaries, without saying a name, telling me that she was so happy she found a job in a cleaning, like as a cleaner in a restaurant. And when she went to that job, the employer had cream, massage cream, and told her that he will pay her the same amount of money, but she doesn't need to do the cleaning. She just needs to give him a massage. It was heartbreaking to hear her telling me this story, and that she was so uncomfortable doing it, but she did it because she needed that money. So these are the things that women are going through. And for them coming from other countries, expecting, you know, to live in justice and that human rights are respected in this country, etc., etc. And then to go through these things, it's really hard, especially that lots of them cannot go back to their countries. With the COVID, lots of countries have shut their borders. So even if they wanted to go back, they cannot. They have children, they cannot have free school meals, they cannot have a GP. It's just heartbreaking. So these are some of the issues that we witness that women are going through. And I just want to add one thing, that at Solidarity Britannia, we are in the process of running a campaign urging the government to grant amnesty for people who have been in this country long enough and with no criminal problems and etc. on a one-year basis, so they can move into becoming no recourse public funds documented. After 1 year, they can renew that process again and just grant them rights to remain in the UK. Other European countries have done it. I'm not sure why is it taking so long to the Home Secretary or to Boris Johnson or to this government to take actions, because women, children, and many are suffering in silence. And I don't think that it's 1.3 million. I think it's more than that.
Thank you, Lynda. Yeah, thanks for your contributions. I'm now going to invite Helen from Gabriela London and Filipino Domestic Workers Association UK, FDWA, to speak.
Hi, good evening, everyone. It is an honor to be here tonight. I am Helen, Chair of Gabriela London. We are a grassroots Filipino women-led organization. Gabriela works with other community-based organizations to address various issues that migrants experience in the UK, including domestic abuse, racism, human trafficking, and modern-day slavery. We campaign for human rights, equality, feminism, and other important emerging issues both in the Philippines and in the UK. The Filipino population in the UK is considered the largest outside Asia and the US over the past 30 years. Filipinos in the UK has increased by more than 800% from 1800s in the 1980s to roughly 250,000 today. Moreover, an estimated 60% of Filipino overseas workers are women who are mostly in healthcare, social care, and domestic work. In the UK, an estimated 100,000 domestic work visas for Filipinos were issued by the Home Office in the last 10 years. The increasing feminization of Filipino migrant workers have an impact on the Filipinos they left behind. I am one of them. We are the mothers, daughters, wives, and sisters who were forced to leave home, driven away by our impoverished condition due to lack of decent paying jobs in the country and facilitated by the export labor policy of the Philippine government that further drains the country with much needed human resources. Back in the Philippines, we are celebrated as the modern day heroes who help make the economy flourishing with our remittances. But we are also becoming the modern day slaves. Many of us had fallen victims to human trafficking, forced labor, and exploitation. And because of the hostile immigration law in the UK, which reverses all concessions that migrant workers used to enjoy prior to 2012, it enabled abuse, slavery, and exploitation to happen even before the pandemic. One Filipina domestic worker who was brought to the UK by her Arab employers was only fed with one bread a day for 10 days before she had the courage to escape her abusive situation. Another Filipina was physically and verbally abused with all sorts of indignation by her employer, made to sleep on the floor even during winter, and had to do all the housework from early morning hours until 1 a.m. There are clear cases of human trafficking, but because of insurmountable loans back in the Philippines that subject Filipino migrants in debt bondage, many of us had to endure exploitative conditions, such as working excessive hours without breaks and time off, not being paid the agreed salary in the contract, unable to have contact with family, have no access to our passports, lacking privacy and food, and other forms of abusive condition, including psychological, physical, and sexual abuses. Many of these migrant women escape their abusive employers, but end up becoming undocumented or illegal migrants. Reports say that an estimated 1.2 million are undocumented migrants who work in precarious job conditions without access to social and health care, nor protection from harm and exploitation. The precarity of our work condition and insecure immigration status are exacerbated with the COVID-19 pandemic, which multiplied illegal, exploitative working conditions in recent months. With no recourse to public funds, many undocumented Filipinos migrants end up unemployed and without access to furlough schemes. Many are on the brink of destitution. The stress of the pandemic has also resulted to their mental health breakdown. Our congested home situation, where many of us had to share beds and common areas without means of self-isolation, also resulted to people getting ill of COVID-19 without getting any healthcare assistance. One Filipino domestic worker was sent away by her employer when she contacted COVID-19, and with no means to self-isolate, he was forced to stay with a friend. Another was forced to work at a salary that is half the amount of the living wage, while many others have to rely on food vouchers assistance of charities and churches. Many undocumented migrants also have no access to COVID-19 vaccine, yet we rely on them to perform everyday jobs that British society does not dare carry out. British society does not dare carry out. We are the invisible labor forces who remain unrecognized. We are the invisible hands that propel the economy despite this pandemic. During the pandemic, the number of domestic violence crimes reported to police in England and Wales has also risen. The COVID-19 virus, as well as the lockdown measures put in place to combat it, provided perpetrators with a weapon that they quickly learned to use for intimidation, manipulation, and instilling terror. As a result, survivors were vulnerable to escalating domestic violence while still being limited in their option to access assistance. For instance, a Filipino woman who was promised marriage by her foreign partner when she was brought in the UK as a fiancé had to endure physical and sexual abuse and was constantly threatened that she would be reported by her partner to immigration officers. Filipino undocumented migrants in daily basis experience these hostile policies of the UK government. We cannot access any housing, health, and employment rights. But lest we forget, we are also humans with human rights and human dignity. We literally break our back to contribute enough to this nation, and we are productive members of British society. This pandemic and hate towards ASEAN migrants in the US and UK has worsened the life of our Filipino undocumented migrants. Gabriela London, with the help of Kanlungan Filipino Consortium, rescue Filipino women and their kids from their abusive partners or employers here in the UK. We also provide practical advice, mental health support, and empower them through our bespoke workshops. Gabriela London is also one of the active campaigners for Status Now campaign and regularization of undocumented migrants. Now, more than ever, we need to arouse, organize, and mobilize our migrants, men and women alike, to fight for their rights and the rights of their children's children, for a country where no parents would be forced to leave their children behind. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Helen, for speaking about a wide variety of issues that we have seen impact undocumented migrant women, and speaking directly from the experiences, particularly of domestic workers and the Filipino community. So a lot of what Helen has spoken about kind of leads on to our next section. So I'm going to speak a little bit about how work and finances are impacted for undocumented women. So in the case of undocumented women, they are particularly vulnerable to exploitation, as many are fearful of reporting employers or claim better work conditions due to risk of being reported to the Home Office. Undocumented migrants often work for low wages, sometimes below minimum wage, and employers can refuse to pay them knowing their situation. And Helen spoke and mentioned about the experiences of domestic workers and how they're impacted by their precarious situations. On top of this, due to their immigration status and policies that prevent them from having the right to work and from accessing public funds when in need, undocumented migrant women are unable to benefit from things like statutory sick pay, universal credit, or furlough, which we all know have been lifesavers for millions of people during this pandemic. As a result of this, this can force migrant women into destitution and more exploitative situations. So I have a question. Could the panelists that work to support migrant women briefly share some of what they have been seeing or experiencing during the pandemic? What needs to be done to prevent women ending up in such situations on a local level and on a policy level? Who would like to answer? Lynda? Yeah, okay.
It seems like I've answered a little bit of this question in the first part, but yeah, women, from what I've noticed through the work in Solidarity Britannia, have been pushed into destitution, suffered all kind of abuse from all the sides, from the government, from the society, from the partners, from everyone, employers, from their landlords. I have, for example, when there is no domestic violence, there's a problem of poverty. So I have a case where the woman is undocumented, the man is undocumented, they have children, but they couldn't pay their rent, so they've been pushed out. So the woman now is living with a friend who's a female, and her husband is living with a friend who's male. So they're not together, the family is not together anymore because they don't have money to afford the room. So they're just trying to do what they can do. As I said before, accessing the vaccine is a huge issue. I mean, so many of them are at high risk of dying if they catch the virus, with asthma and all kinds of other illnesses, and they're desperate to have the vaccine. But we referred them, to NHS. We made an agreement that if we give them a letter saying that they are beneficiaries or they are volunteers with the project, then they can have a letter and they can have the vaccine. But they were, declined that when they went to the hospital. They were asked ID, photo ID, all kind of paperwork that they don't have. So it is really bad to see that this is happening, especially that we're trying to get rid of this virus and the pandemic altogether. Exploitation from employers, they get paid really little money. And the interesting thing is, during the very hard times of the beginning of the pandemic, these people cooked our food, transported it, brought it to our homes, when we could not go out. I mean, I was out every day, but I'm talking generally speaking. Those who were not able to go out, people who were undocumented mainly made the food, and lots of them have skills, but they are underpaid. They get like £2 per hour. They don't pay tax, but then the person who is employing them is taking advantage of them. Same with rent. Sorry, this is just the last point. When the government declared that nobody's allowed to push anybody out, even if they cannot pay rent, it wasn't the case with undocumented migrants, especially women. And they fear to report that to the police in case they get deported.
Thank you, Lynda. Can I ask Ribeiro-Addy to speak about what needs to happen in terms of policy and local level change to prevent women from ending up in these situations?
Sorry, I had some trouble hearing you. What were the last two words you said? You said what has to change in terms of policy?
Yeah, so what needs to be done to prevent women ending up in such situations on a local level and on a policy level? So we spoke about to stop migrant women in the pandemic, things that they've experienced, what needs to change on policy level?
Well, I think firstly, there needs to be equal support. At the moment, and during a pandemic, during a public health crisis, there's absolutely, it makes no sense to create two classes of people in this country, because we will never stem, and this is again not looking at even it from the moralistic way, but looking at it from a point of view of stemming the spread of the virus, making sure that everybody has equal support. Immigration status should not matter at this moment in terms of getting the support that individuals need. So as a first point, all of those things need to be literally waved out of the way, so that everybody's accessing support. People are not doing things that are putting themselves at risk. If you create a situation where there is no recourse to public funds, people are being forced to go to work because there's no other way in which they can ensure they can feed their families, and that's the situation you're putting people in. And even now we're seeing such worrying situations where people aren't putting themselves forward for the vaccination. And now there are a lot of issues about the vaccination anyway, in terms of certain communities being really apprehensive about taking it. But for some people from migrant communities, they're apprehensive about taking it because they're scared of data sharing. There are things such as data sharing that should not be happening at this point in time. I mean, I don't necessarily agree with it overall, but if we're just looking for the purposes of the pandemic, we need to suspend the hostile environment and just make sure that everybody is getting exactly either the financial support or medical care that they need.
Thank you so much for your answer. Yeah, I think it's really important that people don't understand that. I mean, the general public, like we talked about, Boris Johnson not understanding the NRPF and what it meant, but there's so much privilege we've had as British citizens around financial support that has supported us in the pandemic, and it should be afforded to everyone irrespective of immigration status. And as you mentioned about vaccines, I think it's important to speak about health of women and children. So obviously pregnancy can be an exciting time for many people, but we know that women carry the overwhelming burden of childbearing. And for women who are undocumented, childbirth in hospitals can result in charges that range from £7,000 to £10,000. And this cost is out of reach for any woman in this situation. And so many are left in debt that causes stress and anxiety with no means to pay it off, and fearing contact from the Home Office and immigration enforcement. In the case of reproductive health, undocumented migrant women also incur health charges for hospital care, as is the case of Chantel, who is admitted due to abnormal bleeding, underwent investigative procedure and finally diagnosed with PCOS, but she now has to pay a hospital bill of £4,000. So I wanted to ask any of the panellists, how can migrant women with insecure status or who are undocumented be better supported by health services in the UK? Are there any specific policy changes that need to happen or practices that need to be stopped? And can I ask Loraine to speak?
Yeah, so I agree, like Lynda, who was talking about people having problems registering with the GPs. I think there is like some confusion, which I see sometimes where sometimes people say, yes, we register asylum seekers and the undocumented people, but when undocumented person turns up at the GP, they ask for the ACC card. So you're like, is undocumented, so you can't have an ACC card. So there's kind of like lack of information somehow. So you have to really, you know, fight to get there. But I think in terms of healthcare, as we are saying, it's a human right issue. So yeah, I don't think it's fair. We have here women as well who have been charged like £6,000 for giving birth, and then they have to pay slowly, because if you're not paying it, therefore it might affect your citizenship or things like that in future. But I think, yeah, there's need to be compassion for people, because some of the people, they come here where they are still young, still childbearing age, and just denying them that right, I think it's not appropriate.
Yeah, thank you, Loraine. I think it's really important to highlight these issues. I think a lot of people, we have an amazing health service, we take it for granted, and it's important that people understand that this is impossible. People who have precarious work situations are unable to pay these bills off. They have no way to make those bill payments. Can I bring in Helen to just answer the question? I'll just repeat it again. How can migrant women with insecure status or who are undocumented be better supported by health services in the UK? Are there any specific policy changes that need to happen or practices that need to be stopped?
There's only one thing to do that. They must regularize immigration status for women so that they can access legal assistance and the health assistance as well. Just the regularization is the answer to all migrants, women, and the like. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Very succinct. I think it's important. Yeah, I think a lot of people don't understand this irregularity and how it impacts people's health and well-being. Bridget, is it okay if I bring you in to answer this question? What can be changed, or what practice can be changed in order to stop this issue?
Hi. Yeah, like Lynda just said, I know there are loads of petitions going on to give people status. I think that's the best thing. And sometimes even I've been in a situation whereby even when I had the opportunity to regularize my status, they came saying a different thing. So it was like a different ballgame. I had to start all over again. The thing is, the Home Office, what they're trying to do is break everybody down, where it's like we're at the top, and whatever we say, you listen to. But what I keep saying to people is we have to keep fighting. And I would say to every sisters here, everybody here, sorry, that if there's a petition, please do sign them. We just have to make sure, keep pushing that everybody's given this equal right in this country, that we have a status irrespective of what it is, so that people have access to services needed. because I think there's this thing called the hierarchy where some people, just because of the status, cannot access services. So if the Home Office can just give people a status, I think that will make things easier for everybody, because without that, it's a very difficult situation we find ourselves, and this tends to break people down. So yes, if the Home Office would listen to everybody and just regularize everybody's status, that would be brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. Yeah, I think it's important to highlight that it is important for people to be able to regularize their status. Unfortunately, at the moment, for so many people, that is the 20-year route, and it's completely unreachable and leads to people being in precarious situations for 20 years plus another 10 years while they get their indefinite leave to remain. I think it is really something like that's why Regularise has been set up, is because we think it's important to have a 5-year route for people to regularise their status, and similarly why campaigns such as Status Now for All have been set up, because having status is a way for people to attain basic rights. Sorry, Lynda, would you like to answer?
Yeah, just going to add one point. I think, yeah, the government is making a point that there isn't enough money, to look, help all these people. However, the Home Office spends £392 million every year on enforcement, immigration enforcement, on arrest centers, jails, etc. I think that if they use this money in health and well-being, education centers, trainings, etc., that would resolve a big issue for a lot of undocumented migrants. That's the only point I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's important to highlight the amount of money that's spent on immigration enforcement, and it's particularly in paying private companies to enforce immigration, and how it could be better spent on those who are undocumented. So we are coming to the end of the session. So I just want to ask each of the panelists, in one sentence, if you can just summarize one thing that would make a difference to the lives of undocumented migrant women living in the UK. I suspect you're going to have some similar answers and themes, but yeah, if you can just mention one thing. So can I go to Loraine first?
Yeah, like many people have already mentioned about it, it's status now for all, but yeah, we are not going to get there just like that. We need to keep up with the pressure. We need to keep campaigning about it. So if people can sign up, there's a link already in the chat about status now. Let us show our support so that we can bring all women together with us, because until the last woman is free, we are all not free. Thank you.
Thank you, Loraine. Always beautifully said. Can I ask Helen?
Yeah, so immigration must regularize status for women to access assistance, and then to regularize everyone. And then we need unity. We need to unite to push through our campaigns. If we will not do this together, we cannot attain what we are asking for, and what we are going for change. We will be having change if we will work together.
Thank you, Helen. Yeah, I think it's so important that we have acts of solidarity, and things like Status Now Network really highlight that. Lynda, can I bring you in just to say one thing?
Yeah, so I think there are 3 key points. Solidarity, that's why we call Solidarity Britannia. Resistance, and then keep shaming the government. One very, very, very important factor. Shame on you.
Thank you, Lynda. Bridget, can I bring you in just for one thing to add?
Yes, we should not be seen, women should not be seen as numbers, figures. We are humans, and then should be treated with respect, and respect our choice. And we chose to come here for certain reasons, and those reasons should be respected. And finally, like I said, women should not be seen as numbers, but as humans. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. Yeah, I think it's the importance of these types of conversations is to highlight this isn't just numbers, but individual stories, and it impacts so many women and how it impacts them. Ribeiro-Addy, would you just like to add one thing?
I would say end the hostile environment, and all of those measures that have come along with this, which have only made the lives of migrant women worse. Ending the hostile environment would encapsulate all of these, including some of the issues that we have with detention centres, no recourse to public funds, and of course, the lack of access to healthcare.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think everything that everyone has shared is something that we need to focus on, things around regularisation of people's status, uniting together and acting in solidarity. And we need to end policies that have created an environment for people that is exclusionary and doesn't allow them access to right to work and right to rent, and these disproportionately impact migrant women. So I'm just going to wrap up. It's been a very busy session with incredible panelists. So I just want to thank all the panelists, Helen, Loraine, Bridget and Lynda. You're all incredible women. Sharing your experiences and observations has been really interesting to hear from the panelists, I'm sure, from the participants, I'm sure. And we're so glad for you to participate in this crucial discussion that brings to light the pressing issues affecting undocumented migrant women. And I'd like to thank Ribeiro-Addy for taking the time to meet us today, and for her contributions and engagement that we hope will only grow and continue until rights are attained for undocumented people. I'd like to thank the rest of the Regularise team, for which this would not be able to happen. And I'd like to shout out to Srinka and Migrants Organised for allowing us to use their webinar account. I want to thank everyone for attending this webinar to mark International Women's Month, and we hope you will either join or continue in the struggle for rights for undocumented migrant folk in the UK, or wherever you are, and the liberation of all women globally. If you would like to keep up to date with Regularise or any of the groups that participated in this webinar, visit the websites or follow their social media accounts. We will also share that to those that are registered at Eventbrite with a follow-up email in case you haven't got all the details down. And finally, we have 3 asks before you go. So we'd really like if you could contact your MP to ask them to vote on 3 amendments relating to the domestic abuse bill, and those are amendments that protect migrant women. Step Up Migrant Women have come up with a letter template, so all you have to do is amend that template and send it to your MP. We'd also encourage you, if you have the funds to do so, to donate to Chantel's Just Giving crowdfunder to support her to cover her hospital bill. And thirdly, we'd like to encourage you to write to your MP. Again, if you want to incorporate these into 2 letters, but we would suggest separating them, about a regularisation scheme. Helen and various other people on this panel have mentioned the importance of regularising the immigration status of undocumented migrant women. So we would encourage you to do that. There is a template letter on the regularise.org website, but we've also pasted that into the chat. So those are 3 asks, and we'd really encourage you to do them yourself and share them with people that you know. So thank you so much, and thank you for spending your evening listening to myself and all of the panelists. So we're going to end now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.